Before the hum fades, before the last petal falls, make a promise to yourself right now, stay until the end of this story. Because what you're about to hear could change the way you see food, nature, and your own future. If you care about the planet, if you've ever tasted real honey, if you've ever wondered how small lugs can shape the destiny of entire ecosystems, then this story is for you. Don't scroll away. Breathe, listen, stay with me. Imagine the soft vibration of thousands of wings moving in perfect rhythm, like a living heartbeat hidden inside a wooden box. That sound is where everything begins. It's not noise, it's a language. A language I learned slowly, patiently, with stings on my hands and humility in my chest. Between second 15 and 25. Let me tell you clearly what this journey is about. This is a story about modern ecological beekeeping and sustainable farming. It's about technology and tradition colliding. It's about a giant industrial honey farm that produces nearly 1 million liters of honey. And about one beekeeper standing in front of an audience, daring to question whether bigger really means better. And that beekeeper. I remember the first time I stepped into that enormous apiary in the United States. Rows and rows of hives stretched to the horizon like military formations. Trucks, sensors, drones, algorithms tracking nectar flows. Screens glowing with data about temperature, humidity, productivity. It was impressive, almost overwhelming. This was agriculture transformed into industry. Bees transformed into numbers on a dashboard. And yet something inside me felt uneasy. Because I grew up differently. I grew up watching my grandfather lift a hive lid slowly, respectfully, as if greeting an old friend. He would whisper, "Easy, girls. I'm here to help." People used to laugh at him for talking to bees. Today, science confirms that calm behavior, gentle movements, and low-stress environments actually improve colony health. My grandfather didn't need studies. He had intuition, experience, and love. Standing there in that mega farm, surrounded by technology capable of harvesting 1 million liters of honey, I felt torn between admiration and fear. The productivity was undeniable. The efficiency was real. But I kept asking myself a question that wouldn't leave me alone. What is the true cost of all this honey? Because bees are not machines. They are living guardians of biodiversity. They pollinate our crops, sustain our ecosystems, and quietly hold together the fragile balance that feeds humanity. When we push them too hard, when we optimize only for profit, when we forget their natural rhythms, we don't just risk honey production, we risk everything. That realization is why I chose a different path. I chose ecological, modernized beekeeping rooted in respect. Smart sensors, yes. Data, yes. But always guided by ethics, always guided by sustainability, always guided by the understanding that a healthy hive matters more than a full barrel, that long-term balance matters more than short. As I stood on that stage, speaking to farmers, students, and fellow beekeepers, I told them the truth: technology is not the enemy. Disconnection is capital is not the enemy. Greed is, scale is not the enemy. Forgetting our values is. And I watched their faces change. Some skeptical, some curious, some deeply moved, because many of them felt what I felt but had never heard it spoken aloud. This is not just a story about bees. It's a story about choices, about the kind of agriculture we want, the kind of food system we support, the kind of future we leave behind. And if you stay with me until the end, you'll understand why the smallest creatures on Earth might be teaching us the biggest lesson of all. The room was silent after my words, the kind of silence that feels heavy but alive, as if every person is having a private conversation with their own conscience. I could see it in their eyes. They were no longer just listening to a talk about beekeeping. They were questioning their relationship with nature itself. And that is where real change begins. I told them about the million-liter farm, about the sophisticated extraction lines that never sleep, about the conveyor belts carrying golden honey like rivers of liquid sunlight, about the refrigerated warehouses, the automated bottling machines, the export contracts spanning continents. From a business perspective, it was perfection. From a logistical perspective, it was genius. But then I told them what the cameras and the spreadsheets don't show. They don't show the colonies collapsing silently after being pushed too hard during pollination seasons. They don't show the stress when hives are moved thousands of kilometers like cargo instead of living communities. They don't show the subtle weakening of genetic diversity when productivity becomes the only selection criterion. They don't show the emptiness of a field sprayed with chemicals, or bees land and never return. You could hear people shifting in their seats, not in discomfort, but in recognition. Because deep down, we all know when something is out of balance. I shared the story of one particular hive back on my own small farm, a modest place compared to that giant operation. Just a few dozen hives surrounded by wildflowers, fruit trees, and rotating crops shared with neighboring cattle farmers who had committed to reducing chemicals. One spring, after a harsh winter, I thought I had lost a colony. No movement, no sound. I opened the hive slowly, expecting silence, but there they were. Weak, yes. Fewer, yes, but alive, fighting, resilient. Instead of harvesting from them, I fed them back their own honey. Instead of expanding, I let them rest. That season, I lost profit, but the next year, that same colony became my strongest. Not because I forced them, but because I respected their rhythm. This is the heart of sustainable agriculture. It's not about extracting the maximum today. It's about building resilience for tomorrow. It's about understanding the bees, soil, plants, animals, and humans are not separate systems. They are one living network. I explained how modern tools can support this philosophy instead of destroying it. Smart hive monitors that alert us to temperature changes without disturbing the bees. GPS mapping that helps us place hives in areas with diverse forage. Data models that predict nectar flows so we avoid overharvesting. Solar-powered extraction rooms. Regenerative grazing practices in collaboration with livestock farmers that improve soil health and create richer flowering landscapes. Technology guided by respect. Tradition supported by innovation. As I spoke, I realized something powerful. This wasn't just education. This was storytelling with purpose. And stories have the power to shift cultures, to inspire new farmers, to awaken consumers, to make someone watching from far away think, maybe I want to be part of this movement. And if you're still here, still listening, that might be happening to you right now. I leaned closer to the microphone and lowered my voice. Not for drama, but because truth spoken softly often travels further than truth shouted. You don't have to choose between feeding the world and protecting it. I told them. You just have to choose how you feed it. A young student in the front row raised her hand. Her voice trembled slightly when she spoke. But how can small, sustainable farms compete with giants that produce millions of liters of honey? It was the question everyone was thinking. I paused, not because I lacked an answer, but because I wanted her to feel the weight of it. They don't compete by becoming bigger. I said, they compete by becoming more meaningful. I told them about the growing number of consumers who are no longer just buying honey, but searching for real honey. Honey with a story. Honey that comes from landscapes free of toxins. Honey that supports biodiversity instead of exploiting it. Honey that tastes different because it is different. People don't fall in love with spreadsheets. They fall in love with stories. They fall in love with the image of a beekeeper who knows every apiary by heart. They fall in love with the idea that their breakfast supports wildflowers, healthy soil, and ethical farming. They fall in love with the idea that their choices matter. I described how some of the most successful sustainable beekeepers I know don't sell the most honey, but they sell the most trusted honey. They open their farms to visitors. They show their methods transparently. They educate instead of just advertising. They build community instead of just distribution networks. And slowly, powerfully, they create loyalty that no industrial marketing budget can buy. Then I shared something deeply personal. Something I had never said on a stage before. There was a year not long ago when I almost quit. A year when storms destroyed flowering seasons. When disease spread despite all precautions. When expenses grew and income shrank. When the weight of responsibility for thousands of tiny leaves felt unbearable. One evening, exhausted, I sat beside the hives after sunset. The air was cool, the bees had quieted. I remember thinking, maybe the industrial model is right. Maybe I'm the one fighting a losing battle. And then I heard it. A soft hum from inside the boxes. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, persistent, alive. That sound reminded me why I started. Not for volume, not for scale, but for connection, for meaning, for the knowledge that I was part of something ancient and essential. That I was not dominating nature, but collaborating with it. That night I decided I would rather struggle with integrity than succeed without soul. When I looked back at the audience, I saw ears and more eyes than I expected. Not because of sadness, but because they recognized that feeling. That longing for work that aligns with values. That desire to live in harmony instead of constant extraction. This is why this conversation matters. Not only for farmers, not only for beekeepers, but for anyone who eats, anyone who cares about the future, anyone who senses that our food system must evolve if we want to survive. And if you're still listening, still here, it's because some part of you understands that too. I let that silence breathe, not the awkward kind, but the kind that feels like soil after rain, fertile and ready for something new to grow. Then I told them about the other side of the million-liter farm. Because truth, if it's honest, must be complete. I explained how their technology was extraordinary. AI models predicting nectar flows weeks in advance. Microchips inside hives tracking brood development. Thermal cameras detecting disease before the human eye could see it. Fleets of electric vehicles moving hives with logistical precision. This was not ignorance, this was brilliance. But brilliance without wisdom is dangerous. Because while their systems were optimized for yield, they were fragile, too dependent on monocultures, too exposed to climate volatility, too disconnected from the natural diversity that keeps ecosystems resilient. One drought, one disease mutation, one regulatory change, and an entire hyperproductive system could wobble. Sustainable, diversified, small to medium ecological systems, on the other hand, behave differently. They bend instead of breaking. They adapt instead of collapsing. They survive because they are designed to cooperate with nature, not dominate it. That's when I showed them the photos. Not glossy marketing images, real ones. Fields buzzing with pollinators after regenerative grazing. Fruit trees heavy with blossoms because bees had returned. Children standing beside hives, learning without fear. Farmers shaking hands, forming local networks instead of competing. A small extraction room powered by solar panels. A jar of honey with a handwritten label and the name of the valley where it was born. You could feel the energy shift. This was no longer theory. This was proof. And I said something that I believed with every part of me. The future of agriculture will not be won by those who extract the most. It will be won by those who regenerate the most. Regenerate soil. Regenerate biodiversity. Regenerate trust. Regenerate connection. Bees are not just producers of honey. They are messengers when bees thrive. Landscapes are healthy when bees disappear. Ecosystems are collapsing. Listening to bees is like listening to the pulse of the planet itself. I reminded them that every sustainable choice multiplies. One farmer changes practices. Wildflowers return. Wildflowers return. Bees return. Bees return. Crops improve. Crops improve. Local food strengthens. Local food strengthens. Communities become more resilient. This is not romanticism. This is systems thinking. This is real. Some people in the audience began taking notes faster. Others simply watched, absorbed, reflective. A few nodded slowly, as if decisions were being formed in real time. Because once you see the connection, you cannot unsee it. Once you understand that honey is not just a product but a relationship between insects, flowers, soil, climate, and human intention, you never look at a spoonful of it the same way again. And that's the quiet power of stories like this. They don't shout, they don't impose, they awaken. Stay with me a little longer, because the most important part of this story is not the farm, not the technology, not even the bees. It's the choice that comes next. I told them that every person in that room, every person watching from afar, would eventually face a quiet but powerful decision. Not a dramatic one, not a public one, but a personal one. Would they continue supporting systems that drain life from the land? Or would they begin supporting systems that give life back? Because the future of agriculture will not be decided only in boardrooms or laboratories. It will be decided in everyday choices. In the honey you choose to buy. In the farmers you choose to trust. In the voices you choose to listen to. I could feel that many of them wanted to do the right thing. But they felt small, powerless. Like their individual actions didn't matter. So I told them a story. Years ago, a local farmer near Mile and decided to change his practices. He stopped using harsh chemicals. He began planting hedgerows. He let wildflowers return between his crops. People told him he was risking everything. That yields would fall. That he was being naive. The first year was difficult. The second year was uncertain. But the third year, something extraordinary happened. The bees came back, not just mine. Wild bees, butterflies, birds. Life returned to his fields like a forgotten song rediscovered. His soil improved, his crops strengthened. His farm became more resilient to drought. And slowly other farmers started asking questions. Then visiting. Then experimenting. One small change became a ripple. One ripple became a movement. That farmer never set out to change the industry. He simply chose alignment over convenience, integrity over pressure, long-term health over short-term profit. And that is the power every person holds. I looked across the audience and said, if you are waiting for a perfect system before you act, you will wait forever. But if you start supporting better systems today, imperfect but honest, you become part of the transformation. Because sustainable agriculture is not built by heroes. It is built by thousands of ordinary people making slightly better choices every day. Beekeepers choosing to leave more honey for their colonies. Farmers choosing to diversify instead of monocrop. Consumers choosing local over industrial. Educators choosing to teach values alongside techniques. None of these actions make headlines, but together they change everything. And here's the truth most people don't tell you: the industrial system is watching. Large corporations are watching. Investors are watching. When demand shifts, they shift. When values shift, they adapt. They don't change out of kindness. They change because the market forces them to. That means your attention is power. Your interest is power. Your choice to keep listening to stories like this is power. Because awareness always comes before change. I could see it now. People weren't just inspired. They were imagining themselves inside the story. Some as future beekeepers, some as farmers, some as parents teaching their children differently, some simply as more conscious consumers. And that's when I told them the final truth about the million-liter farm. Despite all its technology, despite all its scale, despite all its efficiency, its greatest weakness was not disease, not climate, not logistics. Its greatest weakness was meaning. People were starting to question it. Consumers were asking where their honey really came from. Retailers were demanding transparency. Young farmers were refusing to join systems that felt empty. And slowly, quietly, powerfully, the narrative was shifting. From quantity to quality. From extraction to regeneration. From anonymous production to personal connection. This is not a fantasy. This is happening right now. And if you're still here, still listening, still following this story, then you are already part of that shift. I took a final breath on that stage and said something that felt risky but necessary. The future of beekeeping will not belong to the ones who own the most hives. It will belong to the ones who earn the most trust. Because trust is slow to build and impossible to fake. Bees know it, land knows it, people feel it. I told them that when I walk through my apiaries, I don't see production units. I see communities. I see tens of thousands of tiny lives cooperating without ego, without greed, without exploitation. Each bee doing her role, not for individual gain, but for collective survival. And I asked them quietly, if bees can organize their entire existence around balance and cooperation, why can't we? That question stayed in the air longer than any statistic ever could. I explained how the most powerful innovation in sustainable agriculture is not a machine. It's a mindset, a shift from domination to stewardship, from control to collaboration, from speed to patience. Because nature does not respond well to force, but it responds beautifully to respect. When you stop trying to conquer the land and start listening to it, it begins to guide you. You learn where to place hives by watching which flowers thrive. You learn when to harvest by observing the bees' behavior. You learn when to intervene and when to step back. It becomes less like management and more like partnership. That's when beekeeping stops being a business and becomes a responsibility. I told them that ecological, modernized beekeeping is not about rejecting progress. It's about redefining it. Real progress is not producing more honey at any cost. Real progress is producing enough honey while increasing biodiversity, restoring soils, supporting rural communities, and protecting pollinators for generations to come. Real progress is leaving the land better than you found it. And then I shared the vision that keeps me going when the work feels heavy. A future where schools teach children how pollination works by visiting living hives. A future where cities plant corridors of flowers for pollinators. A future where farmers are respected as ecosystem guardians, not just producers. A future where honey is valued not because it's cheap, but because it's honest. A future where technology supports life instead of replacing it. I told them, this future is not waiting for permission. It is waiting for participation. Because that's the truth. Movements don't begin when everyone agrees. They begin when enough people care. When enough people stay curious. When enough people refuse to look away. And if you're still here, still listening to this slow, deliberate story about bees, farms, choices, and meaning, and then you are proving something powerful, that attention itself is an act of resistance against shallow systems. You are choosing depth over distraction. You are choosing understanding over convenience. You are choosing to stay. The world doesn't change all at once. It changes the way a hive grows. One bee, one action, one choice. One moment of awareness at a time. And somewhere right now, a beekeeper is lifting a hive lid gently. Somewhere, a field is blooming again after years of silence. Somewhere, a child is tasting real honey for the first time and discovering that it carries the flavor of flowers, seasons, and care. This is how transformation happens. Quietly, persistently, organically. Just like the hum inside a healthy hive. And then I shared the part of the story that always seems to touch people the most. Even in the midst of a million-liter operation, or sprawling farms, or high-tech extraction rooms, there is still room for the small, for the personal, for the meaningful. I told them about Maria, a young apprentice beekeeper on my farm. She arrived nervous and sure if she could handle the stings, and sure if she could understand the complexity of the colonies. She started by simply observing, watching, listening, learning to recognize the subtle hums and movements inside each hive. Weeks later, she discovered a small problem that had gone unnoticed by machines. One queen was failing. One hive's brood was not developing properly. Machines had reported normal metrics. But Maria had noticed something subtle: a hesitation in the worker's movement. A faint imbalance in the pattern of wax. Because she cared enough to look, she saved that hive before it collapsed. I told the audience technology is powerful. Data is useful, but empathy, attentiveness, and respect are irreplaceable. That hive thrived, and so did Maria's confidence. And slowly she became not just a student, but a teacher, showing the importance of personal connection with nature, reminding us all that no matter how advanced agriculture becomes, there is no substitute for genuine observation, patience, and care. I paused and said, sustainability is not only about the land or the bees. It is about us, how we choose to engage with the world, how we nurture it or how we exploit it, how we pass our values forward. Then I spoke about the cattle and other livestock on farms that embrace ecological principles. The same philosophy applies. Animals are not machines. They have rhythms, needs, and dignity. When grazing patterns are rotated thoughtfully, when feed is grown sustainably, when animals are treated with respect, the land regenerates, the soil becomes richer, the plants bloom more profusely, bees find more flowers, ecosystems stabilize, production improves, but naturally, not forcibly. And I reminded everyone of something they don't hear often enough: harmony is profitable. Not instantly and not always in obvious ways, but profoundly over time. Farms that care for ecosystems produce stronger, healthier products, communities benefit, consumers value integrity, biodiversity flourishes, and resilience becomes part of the system itself. I looked around the room and felt a connection forming. People weren't just listening. They were feeling it. They were imagining their own farms, their own gardens, their own choices aligning with these principles. Some were nodding slowly, others scribbling furiously. A few whispered to each other, as if sharing a secret they'd just realized themselves. And that's when I said, softly but clearly, if you want to see more of these stories, to learn the techniques, to understand how modern ecology can coexist with tradition, then subscribe and give this video a like, because this knowledge is meant to grow, just like the ecosystems we protect. Don't just watch, be part of it, because the story doesn't end with me, or with this farm, or even with a million liters of honey. It continues in every choice we make, every person we inspire, and every moment we treat life with respect. And in that quiet moment, I reminded them one last time: the smallest actions, just like the smallest bees, can ripple out to create extraordinary change. Somewhere, a hive hums full of life. Somewhere, a field blooms again, wildflowers returning. Somewhere, someone makes a choice to act differently. And somewhere, if you are still here, you are listening. And that matters more than you know. Because the future is built by those who notice, by those who care, by those who choose to stay with the story no matter how long it takes. And that is how we keep the hum alive. And then I told them about the season that changed everything for me personally. It was late spring, after a harsh winter that had thinned the hives more than usual. I walked through the apiary at dawn, the mist rising from the fields, the air smelling faintly of wet soil and new blooms. The bees were slow that morning, as if recovering from the long cold. I knelt by a hive and listened, really listened. And then I noticed something remarkable. Even the weakest hives were still alive. They were still organizing, still working together. Still surviving, not because I forced them. Not because I intervened, but because they were resilient. Because life, when respected and supported, finds a way. I told the audience that's the lesson nature teaches us every day. Resilience is not about brute force. Resilience is about adaptation, balance, and care. I shared how I began redesigning my practices after that season. I introduced rotational grazing for nearby livestock to encourage wildflower growth. I worked with neighboring farms to reduce chemical runoff. I implemented solar-powered monitoring systems that let me check hive conditions without disturbing the bees. I trained apprentices to observe patiently, to respect timing, to value subtle signs of stress or health. Every choice was deliberate, every action guided by the principle that long-term sustainability is more valuable than immediate gain. And slowly I watched the results. Bees thrived, honey production stabilized at sustainable levels, soil quality improved, the surrounding ecosystem became richer. Wildflowers returned birds, butterflies, and beneficial insects multiplied. Cattle grazed healthily without harming the land. Productivity was not maximized in the short, but the farm became far more resilient than any high-tech mega farm I had ever seen. I reminded the audience that this story isn't unique to my farm. Farms like mine exist all over the world, quietly demonstrating that modern technology and traditional wisdom can coexist. That large-scale efficiency is not the only path. That sustainability, care, and community can produce results that are both profitable and meaningful. And then I leaned in softly because this is where many eyes became fixed on me. I said, if you want to understand the tools, techniques, and stories that make ecological, modernized beekeeping work, subscribe and give this video a like. Because knowledge is contagious. And together we can make a bigger impact than any one hive could alone. I told them that the true beauty of beekeeping, of sustainable farming, is in the rhythm of seasons. The winter rest, the spring bloom, the summer abundance, and the autumn preparation. Each phase has its challenges, its lessons, and its rewards. And each is interconnected just like the bees, the soil, the plants, and the humans who care for them. I reminded them that even the largest industrial honey operation depends on the same natural cycles. The difference is that in a sustainable system, we align ourselves with those cycles instead of overriding them. And then, softly, I said, every jar of honey tells a story, not just of sweetness, but of patience, care, observation, and respect. And every choice we make, from the farm we support to the methods we adopt, can amplify that story or diminish it. Somewhere in the room, a young woman's eyes filled with tears. Not sadness, but recognition. Because she understood that story. Because she realized that even small actions, small farms, small choices have the power to create profound change. And I ended that part by saying, the future of agriculture isn't written by machines, investors, or corporations alone. It's written by those who stay, who observe, who care, and who act. Just like bees, we thrive when we work together with intention and respect. I could see the energy shift. People leaned forward. They were listening, not just hearing, but absorbing, not just learning but feeling. And that's when I knew the story was no longer mine. It was theirs. It was ours. And it was just beginning. I could feel the weight of that moment on stage. The air seemed charged with possibility. People weren't just spectators anymore, they were participants in a living story. One that connected bees, soil, livestock, humans, and the future of the planet. I told them about the next step. The part that often surprises people: collaboration. Sustainable, modernized apiculture doesn't thrive in isolation. It thrives in networks. Farmers sharing knowledge about pollination patterns, about flowering cycles, about predator management. Livestock ranchers coordinating rotational grazing with beekeepers to create richer pastures. Local communities planting wildflower corridors. Researchers feeding insights back into practical solutions. Every participant amplifying the health of the ecosystem. I shared an example from my own experience. Last spring, a neighboring farmer contacted me about declining wildflowers on his land. Together, we designed a plan: rotational grazing schedules, pollinator-friendly planting strips, and shared monitoring of hives and soil. Within months, not only did his crops improve, but our bees had more forage, and our honey quality increased. Small actions multiplied through collaboration, creating results no one could achieve alone. Then I paused because this is where the emotional connection deepens. I asked them to imagine walking through a field of wildflowers in early morning light, bees buzzing softly, cattle grazing gently nearby, birds singing, and sunlight glinting off dewdrops. That peace, that harmony is not accidental. It is deliberate. It is the product of care, observation, patience, and collaboration. And every jar of honey harvested from that field carries that story. I told them the reality of scaling such practices. Many people assume ecological farming can't match industrial output. But I explained that the goal isn't to outproduce by volume alone. It's to outperform in resilience, in quality, and in ecological benefit. A farm aligned with nature produces value that endures. When the soil, water, plants, and pollinators are cared for, you don't just get honey, you get a thriving ecosystem, food security, and a legacy that industrial farms cannot replicate. And I reminded them again, the smallest, most attentive actions can ripple outward. Every decision, every intervention, every choice matters. One beekeeper noticing a struggling colony, one farmer planting cover crops, one consumer choosing local, organic honey. These are the threads that weave a larger story of sustainable agriculture. And then I said, if you want to continue following these stories, learn the practical techniques, and see the real-life results of combining technology with ecological wisdom, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like. Knowledge grows when it's shared, and together we can nurture a future worth living in. I told them the story of a bee who, in its tiny life, visits hundreds of flowers a day. Each visit seems insignificant, but collectively they pollinate entire landscapes. In the same way, each person can make choices that feel small but accumulate into transformational change. Then I spoke about patience, because sustainable systems demand it. You cannot rush growth, regeneration, or resilience. You cannot force bees to thrive, soil to heal, or communities to trust. It takes seasons, cycles, observation, learning from mistakes, and adapting strategies. But when patience is paired with care, the results are extraordinary. I reminded them that the bees themselves model this principle perfectly. No single bee controls the hive. No single action determines success. Cooperation, rhythm, and attention to the needs of the whole create a system far stronger than any individual. And humans, if we emulate that wisdom, can create landscapes and communities just as resilient. I could see people leaning in, fully engaged, imagining the possibilities. Some were already thinking about how to apply these ideas to their own lives, farms, or communities. Others were reflecting on the choices they make as consumers and citizens. And that's when I said softly, almost as a promise, the story of bees, farms, and humans is ongoing. It doesn't end with a harvest. It doesn't end with a lecture. It continues in every choice, every action, and every person who decides to care. And if you remain part of this story, you carry its lessons forward. You become the ripple in a sea of change. Because that, ultimately, is what ecological, modernized apiculture is about: noticing, participating, and respecting the intricate dance of life that sustains us all. And somewhere, as the audience sat in quiet reflection, I knew a seed had been planted. And seeds, if nurtured, always grow. The buzz of the bees filled the air as I walked among the hives. Each box, each frame, seemed alive, moving to a silent rhythm that taught patience and observation. Watching the bees work, I remembered why I chose a different path, a path where modern technology serves nature. Not the other way around. It wasn't just about productivity. It was about balance, respect, and resilience. I told the audience how a single change can transform an entire ecosystem. A field planted with wildflowers, rotational grazing for livestock, a hive left undisturbed during peak bloom, small decisions with enormous effects over time. Bees don't just produce honey. They connect every part of the land. And if we learn to listen, we can understand how to protect the entire community that depends on them. I spoke about the giant industrial apiaries, producing millions of liters of honey with drones, sensors, and automated extraction lines. They were impressive, yes, but fragile, dependent on monocultures and industrial management. I compared that to a small ecological farm where the focus was life itself, the health of each bee, the fertility of the soil, collaboration with local livestock farmers. Not everything could be measured in liters. Value lay in sustainability, in regenerating life around the apiary. As I shared these stories, I could see the audience connecting. Numbers matter, but they don't move hearts. What moves hearts are human moments, conscious decisions, and quiet dedication. I told the story of Maria, the apprentice who saved a hive by noticing a detail machines couldn't detect. A seemingly small action, but one that saved the entire colony. Every choice we make has impact. I said, if you support sustainable agriculture, if you choose products that respect nature, if you observe and learn from it, you become part of the transformation. Every word carried intention. Every pause designed to make listeners feel they could act. And here I want to tell you, listening now, if you want to learn more about these techniques, these stories, and how to make a real impact in beekeeping and sustainable farming, subscribe and like this video. It's not just a click, it's a commitment to the life that depends on your attention. Spring slowly returned to my farm, bringing the promise of renewal. The hives responded to the weather. Flowers began to bloom and life resumed its rhythm. Each plant, each animal reminded me that patience and respect produce results invisible at first but powerful over time. Learning to work with nature, rather than against it, was the true secret to sustainable production and the joy of living close to it. The room remained quiet as I paused, letting the imagery sink in. I could see the audience leaning forward, their minds connecting the dots between technology, tradition, and the delicate webs of the bees. I explained that sustainable farming is not just a method, it's a mindset, a way of observing the world and making choices that prioritize long-term balance over short-term gain. I shared stories of collaboration that had changed entire landscapes. Farmers coordinating planting schedules to provide continuous forage, livestock managers rotating grazing to regenerate pastures, and beekeepers monitoring hives in harmony with the land. Each small action multiplied, creating a ripple effect that no single person or machine could achieve alone. I spoke about the value of observation. Machines can measure temperature, humidity, and honey output, but they cannot detect the subtle stress of a hive or the faint hesitation in a colony's movement. Human attention paired with care and respect remains irreplaceable. Maria, my apprentice, had proven that one careful observation saved a colony that the most advanced senses had missed. Every decision matters, I reminded them. Supporting ethical, sustainable practices, observing carefully, and choosing products thoughtfully, all these actions contribute to a healthier, more resilient ecosystem. I described how the farm began to transform after small, intentional changes. Wildflowers returned, bees thrived, and the soil grew richer. Livestock grazed without harming the land, creating natural corridors that supported pollination and biodiversity. Productivity stabilized not through force, but through alignment with nature's rhythms. I emphasize patience. Sustainable systems cannot be rushed. Hives need time to recover, soil needs cycles to rebuild fertility, and ecosystems need years to stabilize. But the rewards, resilience, harmony, and a meaningful connection to the land are worth every moment. Then I reminded them that this story is ongoing. The future of agriculture, beekeeping, and sustainability depends not on a single farm, a single beekeeper, or a single invention. It depends on the thousands of small, conscious choices made every day by people who care enough to observe, to listen, and to act. And I left them with this thought: the smallest actions, when multiplied, create extraordinary change. Like bees visiting hundreds of flowers, every choice we make touches lives far beyond our own. And if you are still listening, that means you are already part of this ripple, already contributing to a future where sustainability, respect, and connection guide the way forward. I continued, letting the silence settle before speaking again. The beauty of ecological, modernized beekeeping, I said, is that it doesn't demand grand gestures. It thrives in consistency, attention, and care. I shared another story, this time about a field near my farm where wildflowers were scarce and soil exhausted. A neighbor had relied on heavy chemicals for years. Together, we planted pollinator-friendly strips, introduced rotational grazing, and monitored the soil carefully. At first, progress was slow, bees were hesitant, flowers sparse, and harvests modest. But by the next season, the field had transformed. Wildflowers returned, native bees appeared, and the soil regained its strength. The hive buzzed with life, stronger than ever. This, I explained, is the principle behind sustainable systems: resilience through diversity, patience, and observation. Large industrial farms may produce more honey at first, but small, thoughtful systems build a foundation that can endure storms, droughts, and disease. Over time, this resilience becomes invaluable. I reminded the audience that every jar of honey carries a story, not just sweetness, but a narrative of care. timing, observation, and respect. It reflects the choices of beekeepers, farmers, and communities. If you have ever dreamed of living closer to nature, if you have ever imagined producing your own honey, if you feel that modern life is pulling you too far away from what really matters, then stay with me because this talk may change the way you see the land forever. Today I am not only speaking about beekeeping, I am speaking about a way of life, a modern, sustainable, and deeply human path. Behind me, you see this apiary. But this is not just a workplace. It is a living ecosystem, a balance between humans, insects, plants, soil, sun, rain, and time. I stand here not only as a beekeeper, but also as someone who works the land, who understands tractors, who lives alongside livestock, and who believes that the future of agriculture must be ecological, intelligent, and respectful. If you are watching this and thinking, maybe I could do this, to hold on to that thought, because every real beekeeper started exactly there. Let's begin with something many beginners underestimate: the location of the apiary. Beekeeping does not start when you buy bees. It starts when you observe the land. A good apiary needs morning sunlight, protection from strong winds, access to clean water, and a natural diversity of flowering plants. Your bees must live in harmony with their environment, not in conflict with it. Modern ecological beekeeping is not about forcing productivity. It is about creating the right conditions so the colony can develop naturally, strongly, and healthily. When the environment is right, the bees respond with strength, balance, and resilience. And this is where real beekeeping begins. Another important decision is the type of hive you choose. Langstroth, dad ant, lay ends, different systems, different philosophies. But no matter the model, the principle should always be the same: respect the natural behavior of the colony. We are not factory managers. We are not controlling machines. We are working with living beings that have their own intelligence, organization, and rhythm. A modern beekeeper uses technology and tools, yes, but never forgets that the bees come first. Not all bees are the same either. There are breeds that are calmer, breeds that are more resistant, breeds that are better adapted to cold climates, and others that tolerate heat and drought much better. Choosing the right bees is not about maximizing honey at all costs. It is about selecting colonies that belong to your environment, that support biodiversity, and that strengthen your local ecosystem. This is where beekeeping becomes something bigger than production. It becomes responsibility. If you are still listening, it means something inside you already understands this connection, even if you can't fully explain it yet. And that is exactly how this journey begins. Now, let's talk about something that is both practical and symbolic: the beekeeper's clothing. The protective suit, gloves, and veil are not just safety measures, they are a statement of respect for the bees and for yourself. When you wear them, you create a boundary of trust. You are careful not to harm them, and they can work without fear. Modern beekeepers often complement traditional suits with lighter, breathable materials and even small cameras or sensors to monitor the hives. Technology should always serve life, not dominate it. To begin, you will need basic tools: a smoker to calm the bees, a hive tool for inspection, and a brush to gently move bees without causing harm. For the beginner, simplicity is key. Overloading with gadgets can distract from the most important lesson: understanding the colony. Everything you do should be deliberate and calm. Every gesture matters. The bees feel your presence and respond accordingly. One of the most exciting parts of beekeeping is harvesting honey. But modern ecological practices teach us patience. You only take what the bees can spare. If you plan to scale, even slightly, you will need proper facilities for extraction and bottling. This doesn't have to be industrial. A clean, organized workspace is enough. Hygiene, order, and respect for the product are the pillars of professional work. And remember, your honey tells a story: the flowers your bees visited, the seasons they endured, the care you provided. Treat it as something sacred, not merely as a commodity. Many beginners overlook this. Beekeeping is regulated for good reasons. Understanding local laws about hive registration, honey labeling, and disease control protects both you and your bees. Sustainable beekeeping is not just an ecological choice. It is a legal and ethical responsibility. When you respect the rules, you ensure the health of your colonies, your neighbors, and the integrity of your craft. Every element of beekeeping, from clothing to hive choice, equipment, extraction, and legislation, forms a web of responsibility. Modern ecological beekeeping is about observation first, action second. It's about working with nature, not against it. It's about combining tradition with modern knowledge and care with innovation. Every beekeeper starts as a beginner, but every action they take shapes the future of the bees and the land. Look at these hives. Every one of them contains thousands of lives, thousands of stories, and thousands of lessons. And the more you observe, the more you understand that beekeeping is a mirror. It reflects patience, persistence, humility, and respect. If you feel inspired, remember this is just the beginning. Stay with me, because in upcoming sections we will explore even more details about equipment, hive management, and seasonal care. By the end of this journey, you will not only know the basics, you will feel what it means to be part of a living ecosystem. Now let's continue with more practical aspects of beekeeping. The clothing you wear is your first tool. A well-fitted suit, gloves, and veil not only protect you, but also show respect to your bees. When you move calmly and deliberately, the colony senses your presence and reacts with harmony. Modern beekeepers often use lightweight materials, ventilation systems, and even sensors to monitor hive health. The key is balanced. Technology assists, but never replaces observation. Next is the essential equipment every beginner must have. Smoker to gently calm the bees during inspections. Hot tool for lifting frames and managing the hive. Bee brush to move bees without harm. Containers for honey collection. Simplicity is crucial. Too many tools can distract from understanding your colony's behavior. Every action should be deliberate. Every gesture matters. When it comes to honey extraction, patience is your ally. Take only what the bees can spare. Respect their work and their needs. If you set up a small extraction area, ensure it is clean and organized. Proper hygiene and order reflect professionalism and care. Remember, each jar of honey tells a story. The flowers visited, the seasons endured, and the attention given by the beekeeper. Treat it as a living product, not a commodity. Understanding legislation is equally important. Register your hives, follow labeling rules, and comply with disease control regulations. This protects your bees, your neighbors, and your business. Ecological beekeeping is about responsibility, ethical, legal, and environmental. Respecting the law is part of respecting life itself. Now, let's discuss the modern philosophy of ecological beekeeping. Observation first, action second. Work with nature, not against it. Blend traditional knowledge with modern innovation. Every decision affects the colony, the land, and your future as a beekeeper. Every beginner will face challenges, but every careful choice strengthens the ecosystem and your connection to it. Look at these hives. Each one contains thousands of lives, intricate patterns, and lessons about patience, humility, and persistence. The more you watch, the more you realize that beekeeping mirrors life itself. Patience, respect, and observation guide every action. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like if you are ready to start this journey. This is only the beginning. Stay with me as we explore deeper into hive management, seasonal care, and advanced equipment in upcoming sections. By the end of this hour, you will not only know the basics, you will feel what it truly means to be part of a living ecosystem. Managing your hives requires consistency, attention, and respect. Each hive is unique. Some colonies are strong and productive. Others are delicate and cautious. Learning to read the signs, the movement of bees, the shape of the comb, the presence of brood is the heart of successful beekeeping. Modern beekeepers balance tradition with innovation. They use record typing, seasonal calendars, and even simple digital monitoring to track hive health and growth. But no tool replaces observation and intuition. Seasonal planning is crucial. Spring is a time of preparation. Inspect hives carefully, ensure the queen is healthy, and provide supplemental feeding if necessary. Summer is the season of abundance. Flowers bloom, colonies expand, and honey stores grow. Autumn is reflection and conservation. Prepare hives for winter, protect them from pests, and ensure enough food remains. Winter is quiet observation, minimal disturbance, only essential checks. The colony rests, storing energy for the next cycle. Following the rhythm of the seasons connects you to the natural flow of life. It teaches patience, humility, and a deeper understanding of nature. Every beekeeper, beginner or experienced, must also consider the long-term vision. Plan your apiary layout carefully. Consider accessibility for inspections and honey collection, protection from weather, and the diversity of local flora. This is not only practical, it is ecological. The health of the land and the colony are intertwined. Your role is to guide and protect, not dominate. You become a guardian, a teacher, and a learner at the same time. Every hive tells a story. Every frame, every comb, every buzzing colony teaches a lesson. Respect the bees, understand their language, and your journey as a beekeeper will flourish. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like to join this journey of modern, sustainable beekeeping. Stay tuned for future sessions where we will explore detailed equipment reviews, seasonal hive management techniques, specific bee breeds and their unique characteristics, advanced extraction methods, legal updates and industry insights. By the end of this series, you will not just know how to start, you will feel what it truly means to be part of a living ecosystem, and you will be ready to take your first steps with confidence and care. There is something deeply transformative that happens when you spend enough time among the hives. At first, you hear only noise. Then, slowly, you begin to hear meaning. You recognize calm, tension, strength, weakness. You learn when a colony is thriving and when it needs help. This connection cannot be learned from books alone. It is built with time, presence, and respect. Many people arrive to beekeeping searching for honey. But those who stay because they discover something deeper: purpose. Working with bees changes the way you look at agriculture, at technology, and even at progress. A modern beekeeper does not reject innovation. Instead, they use it wisely. Solar-powered fences, moisture sensors, temperature monitoring, lightweight tools, efficient extractors. These are not enemies of tradition. They are allies when used with intelligence and ethics. Beekeeping fits naturally within a modern ecological farm. Bees improve pollination for crops. Healthy landscapes improve honey quality. Responsible grazing improves floral diversity. Smart use of machinery protects the soil. Everything becomes connected. Apiculture, tractors, livestock, soil, water, biodiversity. This is not romanticism. This is functional sustainability. If you are listening carefully, you may start to realize that this path is not about escaping modern life. It is about redefining it. It is about building a future where productivity and respect for life can exist together. Many beginners ask, how many hives should I start with? The honest answer is fewer than you think. Start small, learn deeply, grow slowly. A strong foundation is always better than fast expansion without understanding. Every inspection is a dialogue. You open the hive. You observe. You interpret. You decide. This rhythm develops discipline, patience, and responsibility. These qualities do not stay in the apiary. They follow you into every aspect of your life. And if at this point you feel that this message resonates with you, that this way of thinking connects with something personal, then I invite you clearly and honestly subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Not for numbers, but because this space is being built for people who truly care about doing things the right way. This journey does not end with one talk. It grows with every season, every question, every experience shared. In future sessions, we will go deeper. We will talk specifically about different hive models and when to use each. We will explore detailed protective clothing and professional-grade equipment. We will analyze real extraction rooms and how to design them properly. We will study bee behavior, disease prevention, queen management, and seasonal strategies. We will even discuss the real economics side of beekeeping, without myths and without illusions. But everything begins here, with respect, with observation, with intention. Because beekeeping is not something you do. It is something you become. There is also a truth that many videos never show you. Beekeeping is beautiful, but it is not always easy. You will lose colonies. You will doubt your decisions. You will face weather that you cannot control, flowering seasons that fail, and moments where you feel you have done everything right and still things go wrong. And yet this is exactly where the real beekeeper is born. Because in those moments you learn responsibility. You learn humility. You learn that nature is not something to dominate, but something to understand. This is why ecological beekeeping is not a trend. It is a mindset. It forces you to ask better questions. How can I support the bees instead of exploiting them? How can I improve the environment instead of exhausting it? How can I produce with dignity instead of pressure? Modern tools help, yes. Data helps. Mechanization helps. But ethics must always guide the hand that uses them. When you manage hives with this philosophy, you begin to notice something extraordinary. Your colonies become more resilient. Your honey gains character. Your work gains meaning. People who consume your honey will feel it. Not because of marketing, but because authenticity always leaves a trace. And this is why this channel exists. Not to create viral content, but to build knowledge, to build respect, to build a community of people who want to work with nature, not against it. If you are still here listening, you are already part of that community. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like if you believe that agriculture, apiculture, and rural life deserve a future that is intelligent, ethical, and sustainable. Because the future of beekeeping will not be built by those who seek shortcuts. It will be built by those who are willing to observe, learn, fail, improve, and persist. And in the next sessions, we will continue this path together. When you walk into an apiary with the right mindset, you stop being a visitor and start becoming a participant in something much larger than yourself. You begin to notice the small details, the rhythm of the flight, the subtle changes in sound, the way the bees respond to temperature, light, and even your own mood. This awareness transforms the way you approach every aspect of rural work. You start thinking differently about how you use machinery. You become more careful with how the soil is treated. You pay closer attention to water sources, to flowering cycles, to the impact of chemicals far beyond your own land. A modern ecological beekeeper understands that every decision creates consequences. Using fewer chemicals means healthier bees. Supporting local flora means stronger colonies. Choosing sustainable practices means long-term productivity instead of short-term gains. This way of working does not make you slower. It makes you wiser. Beekeeping teaches you to value time. Not the rush time of deadlines and pressure, but natural time. The time it takes for a colony to grow. The time it takes for nectar to transform into honey. The time it takes for experience to become true knowledge. Many people search for quick results. Few are willing to build something that lasts. And yet, everything truly valuable in agriculture is built slowly. If you are still listening, it means you understand that deep down. That is why this space exists. To offer clarity in a world full of shortcuts. To offer honest guidance instead of empty promises. To show the real path, demanding, but deeply rewarding. Because beekeeping done correctly does not only produce honey. It produces balance. It produces awareness. It produces a different kind of future. And that future begins with people like you who choose to stay, to learn, and to care. There is a moment every beekeeper remembers. The first time you open a hive and feel no fear, only calm. The first time you recognize the queen without searching. The first time you taste honey from your own colonies and realize you did not simply harvest a product, you earned a relationship. These moments are not bought. They are built. Built through patience. Built through mistakes. Built through mornings when you wake early to check the weather, and evenings when you replay every inspection in your mind, wondering how to improve. This is why beekeeping cannot be separated from the rest of rural life. You begin to understand how flowering depends on rainfall, how soil health affects plant diversity, how livestock management influences the surrounding ecosystem, how the way you drive machinery, how you manage land, how you treat margins and wild areas, all of it eventually reaches the bees. A modern beekeeper does not work in isolation. They become a steward of a living system. And this is exactly what the world needs more of. People who understand interdependence. People who think long-term. People who value resilience over speed. If this message feels different from what you usually hear, that is intentional. Because real beekeeping is not about shortcuts. It is about commitment. It is about showing up even when the harvest is small. It is about continuing even after losses. It is about learning when things go wrong instead of giving up. And those who walk this path seriously are never truly beginners for long. They become observers, then practitioners, then guardians. This is not just about producing honey. This is about becoming part of something that existed long before us and must continue long after us. And if you are still here, still listening, still reflecting, then perhaps this path is not as distant from you as you once thought. There is also a responsibility that comes with knowledge. Once you understand what bees need, you can no longer ignore the impact of your choices. You begin to question the use of aggressive chemicals. You begin to protect wildflowers instead of removing them. You begin to value biodiversity not as a concept but as a daily practice. This is where beekeeping becomes leadership. Not leadership over bees, but leadership by example. When neighbors see healthy colonies, strong pollination, and consistent honey quality, they start asking questions. They start paying attention. They start considering change. And slowly, without conflict, without preaching, transformation begins. This is the power of doing things correctly. A single well-managed apiary can influence an entire landscape. A single committed beekeeper can influence an entire community. And every beginner who chooses the ecological path strengthens this movement. You do not need to be perfect to start. You only need to be honest with your intention. Learn, observe, adapt, improve. That is the real cycle of sustainable agriculture. Some days you will feel confident. Other days you will feel uncertain. Both are part of the process. Because growth does not happen in comfort. It happens in attention. The bees teach this without words. They show it in their organization, their resilience, their capacity to adapt without losing balance. If you allow yourself to learn from them, they will make you better, not only as a beekeeper, but as a person. And that is perhaps the most powerful truth of this path. Beekeeping does not just change how you work, it changes how you see the world. At some point, you stop measuring progress only in kilograms of honey. You begin to measure it in quieter ways, in the strength of your colonies after winter, in the calm behavior of your bees during inspections, in the balance you see between production and survival. This is when you understand that success in beekeeping is not about speed. It is about stability. Many people enter this world looking for quick results. But bees teach you a different logic. Slow growth, consistent care, and respect for natural rhythms always outperform impatience. A modern ecological beekeeper learns to design systems that support life instead of exhausting it. Planting flowering trees and hedgerows, protecting water sources, leaving space for wild nature, reducing interventions when the colony is healthy. These choices may seem small, but together they create resilience. And resilience is the true wealth of any agricultural project. You also begin to understand that mistakes are not failures. They are information. Each loss teaches something. Each difficulty reveals what must be improved. This mindset transforms frustration into learning, and learning into long-term strength. This is why beekeeping is one of the most honest activities you can choose. It reflects your decisions clearly. You cannot hide behind marketing or excuses. The bees respond only to reality. And perhaps that is why so many people feel deeply connected to this path. Because in a world full of noise, beekeeping offers clarity. It strips things down to what truly matters: attention, responsibility, consistency, and respect. If you stay on this path, you will not only produce honey, you will produce knowledge, you will produce balance, you will produce impact. And step by step, season by season, hive by hive, you will realize that this is no longer something you are learning. It is something you are becoming. There is a quiet discipline that develops over time in every serious beekeeper. You begin to plan ahead without forcing the future. You learn to prepare without controlling. You act with intention, but you accept uncertainty. This discipline changes the way you manage everything: your schedule, your land, your resources, your expectations. You no longer chase productivity blindly. You design systems that can survive bad seasons, not only good ones. This is where modern beekeeping meets intelligent agriculture. You start asking smarter questions. How can I reduce stress on the colonies? How can I simplify my management without losing quality? How can I make my operation more efficient while remaining ethical? How can I use machinery in a way that protects soil, plants, and pollinators? The answers are never universal. They are personal. They depend on your land, your climate, your goals, your values. And that is why copying others rarely works long term. You must observe your own bees. You must study your own environment. You must build your own system. This is not weakness. This is mastery. When you reach this point, you realize something important. You are no longer following beekeeping. You are practicing it. You stop asking, "What should I do?" And you begin asking, "What are my bees telling me?" That shift changes everything. Because beekeeping is not controlled from textbooks. It is guided from presence, from consistency, from attention. And slowly, without you even noticing at first, you begin to earn something that cannot be bought. Trust. Trust from your colonies. Trust from other beekeepers. Trust from clients who taste the difference. Trust from yourself. That is when this work stops feeling like an experiment and starts feeling like a path. Over time, you begin to understand that beekeeping is not a hobby you visit when you have free time. It becomes a rhythm that shapes your days, your decisions, and even your mindset. You check the weather differently. You observe flowering periods more carefully. You pay attention to subtle changes in temperature, humidity, and wind. All because somewhere in your mind, the bees are always present. This is not obsession. This is awareness. And awareness is one of the most valuable skills any farmer, beekeeper, or rural professional can develop. A modern ecological operation is built on this awareness. You start designing your land with intention. You think about access paths for tractors that avoid disturbing hives. You plan grazing areas to protect flowering zones. You preserve natural margins instead of removing them. You begin to see your property not as separate activities, but as one integrated system. Apiculture, livestock, machinery, soil, vegetation, water, everything starts to work together instead of competing. This integration is not theory. It is practical, efficient, and deeply sustainable. And the most interesting part is this. When your system becomes healthier, your workload often becomes lighter. Fewer problems, fewer emergencies, fewer interventions. Because nature, when supported instead of forced, organizes itself better than any plan. Many beginners fear that ecological approaches mean lower productivity. In reality, the opposite is often true in the long term. Healthy colonies live longer. Stable systems require fewer corrections. Strong landscapes recover faster from stress. Sustainability is not weakness. It is intelligence applied over time. If you are still here, still listening, still engaged, then you are not just watching a video. You are already thinking like someone who belongs to this world. And that is exactly the point where transformation begins. There comes a stage where you begin to understand the deeper value of continuity. Not just continuity of production, but continuity of care. You start thinking in years instead of weeks. You imagine what your apiary will look like in 5 seasons. You consider what kind of landscape you want to leave behind, not only what you want to harvest. This long-term vision changes everything. You become more selective with your actions. You intervene less impulsively. You observe more before deciding. Because you understand that every intervention carries consequences that echo beyond the present moment. A mature beekeeper is not the one who does more. It is the one who knows when to do less. This is one of the hardest lessons to learn, and also one of the most powerful. Many beginners believe that constant manipulation leads to better results. But with time, you realize that excessive interference often creates more problems than it solves. Healthy colonies, placed in healthy environments, often require surprisingly little disturbance. This is the elegance of good beekeeping. Silent efficiency, invisible balance, consistent stability. And when you reach this understanding, something shifts again. You stop seeing bees as units of production. You begin to see them as partners in a shared system. You respect their intelligence. You admire their organization. You protect their conditions instead of forcing their behavior. This mindset does not make you weaker as a producer. It makes you stronger as a professional. Because your work becomes resilient. Your results become consistent. Your reputation becomes solid. People trust honey that comes from care. People respect practices that are honest. People recognize when something is built with integrity. That recognition does not come overnight. But when it comes, it lasts. And that is one of the most valuable things this path can offer. Not fast success, but durable credibility. If you continue walking this road, season after season, choice after choice, you will slowly realize that you are no longer trying to become a beekeeper. You already are one. There is also a quiet pride that grows with experience. Not pride in numbers, not pride in yield, but pride in craftsmanship. You begin to notice it when you open a hive and everything feels balanced. The brood is compact. The bees are calm. The frames are clean. The rhythm is healthy. That moment tells you more than any certificate ever could. This is when you realize that good beekeeping is not loud. It does not seek attention. It does not need to prove itself constantly. It simply works. And people notice. Neighbors begin to ask how you manage your colonies. Other beekeepers begin to observe your results. Consumers begin to trust your honey without needing persuasion. Because consistency speaks louder than promotion. A modern ecological beekeeper builds reputation slowly through actions, not words. Through clean practices. Through respect for animals. Through transparency. Through patience. And that reputation becomes one of your strongest tools. You will also notice something else. Your mindset outside the apiary changes too. You become more patient in everyday life. More attentive to detail. More thoughtful before acting. More aware of cause and effect. Beekeeping does not stay in the hives. It follows you home. It follows you into your work. It follows you into your relationships. That is why many who start this path describe it as more than an activity. They describe it as a teacher. Not a teacher that speaks, but a teacher that shows. Every season shows you something. Every challenge shows you something. Every success shows you something. And slowly, without forcing it, you begin to understand one of the deepest truths of this craft. You do not master beekeeping. You grow alongside it. The bees change. The climate changes. The landscape changes. You change. The work never becomes static. It remains alive. And that is exactly why it remains meaningful. Because when something continues to teach you, when something continues to challenge you, when something continues to require your presence and your respect, it keeps you connected to reality. And in a world increasingly disconnected from natural processes, that connection is no longer just valuable. It is essential. At this stage, you begin to see the broader impact of your work. Your hives are no longer isolated units. They are part of a network that sustains the environment around you. Healthy bees pollinate local plants, which supports biodiversity. Strong colonies ensure your crops thrive without excessive chemicals. Thoughtful land management preserves soil, water, and natural habitats. Everything you do ripples outward. Your decisions affect not only your apiary but the surrounding ecosystem. This is why modern ecological beekeeping is not only a personal endeavor, it is a community responsibility. You also begin to notice how small habits accumulate over time. Regular inspections, careful record typing, and consistent maintenance create stability. Skipping steps may seem harmless, but over time small errors compound, affecting colony health and honey production. And that is the lesson that experience teaches. Discipline is more valuable than shortcuts. Observation is more important than assumptions. Respect is more impactful than control. Beekeeping also teaches emotional resilience. You experience losses, colonies that fail, seasons that underperform, unexpected weather events. But instead of discouragement, you learn to adapt. You learn to analyze, reflect, and improve. Every difficulty becomes a teacher. Every challenge strengthens your skill. Every setback reinforces your commitment to sustainable practices. When you fully embrace this perspective, your work transcends simple production. It becomes a craft, a responsibility, and a source of fulfillment. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like if you are committed to building a future that is ethical, sustainable, and deeply connected to nature. The journey is long, but every step strengthens both you and your colonies. And with patience, care, and observation, you will see the rewards not just in honey, but in life itself. As you continue your journey, you begin to notice patterns you never saw before. The way bees communicate through movement, the subtle shifts in hive temperature, the rhythm of nectar flow through the seasons. These details tell a story if you are willing to listen. Each inspection becomes an exercise in mindfulness. You watch the bees work and you start to understand their needs without speaking. You sense when a colony is stressed, when it is healthy, and when it is ready to expand. This awareness spills over into all aspects of farm life. You manage livestock with more empathy. You rotate crops more intelligently. And you plan machinery use more thoughtfully. Every element of your farm begins to work in harmony because you are now attuned to patterns, cycles, and connections. Beekeeping teaches you patience, but it also teaches foresight. You learn to plan months in advance, to anticipate seasonal changes, and to prepare your colonies for the unexpected. This foresight is a skill that extends beyond the apiary. It becomes part of how you approach every project in life. The beauty of modern ecological beekeeping is that it rewards observation and careful planning, not force or shortcuts. When you respect the rhythm of nature, your colonies grow stronger, your honey is richer, and your work becomes more meaningful. And through it all, you begin to understand one profound truth. The best results are not measured in kilograms of honey, but in the health of your bees, the balance of your land, and the strength of the ecosystem you help sustain. Every season reinforces this lesson. Every success reminds you why you started. Every challenge teaches humility and resilience. If you are still here, listening and learning, then you are already walking the path of a responsible, modern, and ecological beekeeper. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like to continue growing with this community and to stay informed on the next steps in your journey. As the seasons pass, your perspective continues to deepen. You no longer see each hive as a separate unit, but as part of a living, interconnected system. The success of one colony depends on the health of the others, the diversity of surrounding plants, and the care you provide to the land as a whole. You notice subtle shifts in nature, early blooms, late frosts, or changes in local insect populations. These signals teach you adaptability, patience, and humility. You learn to act deliberately rather than react impulsively. Every decision is informed by observation, experience, and respect for life. At this stage, you also begin to understand the intangible rewards, the quiet moments in the apiary, the gentle hum of healthy bees, the satisfaction of seeing colonies thrive under your care. These are the true markers of progress. The honey you harvest is no longer merely a product. It is the result of harmony between human effort and natural processes. And now, as we approach the end of this talk, it is time to reflect. The journey of a beekeeper is ongoing, filled with lessons, surprises, and growth. What began as curiosity evolves into responsibility, awareness, and connection. You have learned that modern ecological beekeeping is not only a method, it is a way of life. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like if you are ready to embrace this path. And stay tuned for future sessions where we will explore each aspect of beekeeping in more detail. The story does not end here, it continues in every hive, every season, and in every beekeeper willing to walk this path with care and dedication. As you step back and observe your apiary, you begin to see the bigger picture. Every hive, every colony, every flower, every tool, and every decision contributes to a delicate balance. Beekeeping is no longer a series of tasks, it becomes a philosophy. You notice how even small actions make a difference. Planting a few extra flowering plants increases nectar diversity. Leaving hedgerows intact provides shelter and habitat. Minimizing chemical use strengthens colonies and the surrounding ecosystem. These choices, repeated season after season, create resilience that lasts far beyond a single harvest. The lessons learned here extend beyond the apiary. Patience, observation, responsibility, and care become part of your daily life. You approach challenges with a calmer mind and a longer view. You understand that every decision has consequences, and that respect for life brings lasting rewards. And now, as this session comes to a close, remember this: the journey of a beekeeper is never truly finished. It is continuous, evolving with every season, every observation, and every choice you make. What matters most is the commitment to act thoughtfully, sustainably, and ethically. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like if you want to continue learning, exploring, and growing as a modern ecological beekeeper. This is not the end, it is simply the beginning of a lifelong path filled with discovery, care, and connection to the natural world. Your journey has only just started, and every step you take will shape the future of your apiary and the life around it. As we draw this session to its conclusion, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for joining me here today. Your presence, your attention, and your willingness to learn mean more than you might realize. Beekeeping is a path that requires dedication, patience, and care, and taking the time to understand is the first step toward truly meaningful practice. We hope that this session has been useful for you. Whether you are a complete beginner or already have some experience, the principles we discussed today, observation, ecological respect, ethical practices, and careful planning, are essential foundations for any beekeeper. The journey does not end here. There is so much more to explore, and we are committed to providing many more sessions, each focused on a different aspect of beekeeping. In upcoming talks, you will learn in detail about selecting and managing the right type of hives for your environment, understanding and caring for different bee breeds, choosing and using the correct protective clothing and equipment, efficient and sustainable honey extraction and storage, legal requirements and best practices for a safe and compliant apiary, seasonal strategies to maximize both colony health and productivity. Each session will build on the knowledge you gained today, providing practical, professional, and ecologically sound guidance. We want you to feel confident in every step you take in your beekeeping journey. Remember, modern ecological beekeeping is about more than honey. It is about building a connection with nature, a relationship with your land, and a deep understanding of life itself. Every decision you make as a beekeeper resonates beyond the hive. It affects the environment, the community, and the future of the craft. So as we close this talk, I encourage you to reflect on what you've learned today. Think about your own apiary, your own land, and the ways you can apply these principles to make a positive impact. Small thoughtful actions create long-term change. Respect, patience, observation, and care are the most powerful tools you will ever have. And above all, remember that you are not alone on this journey. This community of beekeepers, learners, and nature enthusiasts is here to support you. By staying engaged, asking questions, and participating in future sessions, you will continue to grow your knowledge and skills. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like so that you don't miss our upcoming P1 NCIs, which will explore every aspect of beekeeping in even greater detail, from hive management to advanced seasonal strategies, from ecological practices to legislation and safety. We will guide you step by step. Thank you again for accompanying us today. Your curiosity, commitment, and passion for learning are what make this work meaningful. We hope you found this session insightful, inspiring, and practical. Remember, the path of a beekeeper is long and evolving. It is filled with discovery, growth, and connection. And while today is the end of this particular session, it is only the beginning of a much larger journey. Stay tuned for our future P1NCIs. We will continue to explore, teach, and share everything you need to know to become a confident, responsible, and modern ecological beekeeper. Together, we can nurture not only our bees, but our land, our communities, and the next generation of beekeepers. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for committing to this path. We look forward to seeing you again in our next session. Until then, observe, care, and continue building your connection with the natural world. The journey has only just begun, and your role as a guardian of nature is already underway. Let's walk this path together, one hive at a time. Thank you, and see you soon in our next P1 Chia.